Speaking again, Your Worship, on behalf of the Association of Oakville Harbour Stakeholders to the question of erosion and sediment control. This is a plan. This is the plan of the proposed subdivision, and you can see on that plan 22 blue dots. Each of those blue dots is a storm drain. So there's terrific opportunity for sediment to pour into Lake Ontario from this development. So taking some guidance from the advice you provided earlier on this item, Your Worship, through you to staff, I'm wondering if they would be so kind as to request that the proponent, perhaps through the conditions of subdivision approval, provide the necessary inlet protection for the storm drains on this particular development before they actually do the work. That is my request, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Yes, the last delegation that's listed is Mr. Paul Jemison here on behalf of the West River Residents Association.
Welcome, Mr. Jameson. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. I'm Paul Jemison. I'm Vice President of the West River Residents Association, and members of our executive have met with the President of SCORA and gone over his plan, and I'm just here to say that on behalf of our Board of Directors that we think it's a really nice proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information. Are there other members of the public with information for Council on this file? I'll give you a second to think it over. All right, I don't see any, so I'm going to confine it to table, and I'll look to the ward. Councillor Duddick.
Yes, I'll give you a motion to receive and look forward to the ongoing discussions between Canada Land and SCORA and any of the other concerned residents.
Thank you. I wonder if, before I put the vote on that, Councillor Elgar, I don't want to accidentally do you out of an opportunity to ask about soil volumes. Did you have any concerns about the trees on this?
Your Worship, I did, but I thought I'd talk about it offline to find out how many cubic meters of soil volume they would have in their development, because I know what we're looking for now is 30 cubic meters for street trees.
Well, they may or may not know that. If staff could take under advisement our concern about being able to show in the plan of the utilities how where and how the soil is going to be provided, just to continue to pursue our tree cover goals. Thanks very much. So with that, I'll put the motion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and it carries, and the report is received. And that brings us to our discussion item, which is the recommendation report for Silwell Developments Limited on Oak Park Boulevard and Taunton Road. And if you'll turn your attention to Trish Collingwood, she will update us on the file.
Oh, which one's mine? Thank you, Your Worship, members of Council. Before I start, I just want to note that a revised bylaw was distributed under a cover memo describing the revisions that took place since the bylaw was presented in the agenda. So tonight we're here to talk about Silwell Developments Limited, the Oak Park Boulevard Taunton Road lands. The lands are located at the southwest corner of Oak Park and Taunton Road. They stretch down towards Glen Ashton Drive. This is a view from Oak Park and Taunton. The lands are currently vacant. The proposal includes a 4-story commercial residential mixed-use building along Oak Park Boulevard. The proposal includes 94 residential units, approximately 15,000 square feet of ground floor commercial and underground parking, and that is along Oak Park Boulevard here. The proposal as well includes multiple 3.5-story townhouse buildings with a total of 131 units, which is considered Block 5 here. Units along Taunton Road here have live-work permissions in the proposed bylaw. The southerly blocks on the site, parcels 6, 7, and 8, include 27 stacked townhouse units each for a total of 81 residential units. The proposal also includes the extension of Taunton Road to an interim 2-lane condition until such time as the lands to the east develop. This is one of the first rezoning applications in the Uptown Core to be considered under Livable Oakville. It is consistent with the vision and policies for the Main Street and high-density residential designations. The Main Street designation along Oak Park Boulevard has a height limit of 4 to 6 stories, while the high-density residential designation permits 51 to 185 units per site hectare. The objectives and policies of the Uptown Core envision this area as a mixed-use area that will function as a pedestrian and transit-oriented community with a full range of medium and high-density housing types. The lands along Oak Park Boulevard and the west side of Taunton Road are zoned H1 UCC 3R under Special Provision 592. The lands at the northeast corner of Sawgrass Drive and Georgian, are zoned H1 UCR 1B. The need for the proposed zoning bylaw is to permit the mixed-use development along with the high-density residential uses as envisioned under the Livable Oakville policies. A public information was held on September 21st, 2011, as well as statutory public meeting was held for this application on September 26, 2011. Comments received during the rezoning review process include timing of Taunton Road construction. The town will secure the portion of Taunton Road that is to be constructed as part of the site plan process. Final construction of the ultimate cross-section for Taunton Road will be included at the time that the lands to the east develop. The impact of the transportation network has been analyzed through the transportation studies dating as far back as 2008 as well as 2010. The work has been completed by the town in preparation and in support of the policies for the Livable Oakville plan, as well as in support of the Uptown Core as a growth node and the continued development of the vacant lands. Findings of the transportation studies anticipate that the road network will operate at a satisfactory levels of service for an urban condition. Residents have raised concerns about the 2 access points of the northerly block on Georgian Drive. Currently, the access points have been located to assist in safe and efficient internal site circulation, as well as for waste management. The transportation impact study forecasts limited traffic at these points in the peak periods, both AM and PM. However, through the site plan process, these access points will be discussed further with the applicant. The applicant submitted a site design concept that was used throughout the rezoning review process. However, the final design considerations and decisions for the buildings and elevations will be determined through the site plan process. This process is underway and can include the opportunity to look at sustainable building initiatives and increased greening of the site. The current proposal includes coordinated and pedestrian-scaled streetscaping, opportunities for walkways between the buildings along Oak Park Boulevard, and and to provide better pedestrian access. Links to amenity space and transit, as well as parking areas that can be screened from the public view. Issues have also been raised related to the amount of parking proposed throughout the development. Staff feel that the provision of underground and surface parking for the mixed-use building along Oak Park Boulevard is in keeping with the walkable and transit-oriented mixed-use development that the town encourages in the Uptown Core. With regards to stacked townhouses along Sawgrass, Georgian, Taunton, and the southerly blocks along Taunton. The parking ratio proposed is consistent with Section 30 of the town's consolidated zoning bylaw. For Block 4 along Oak Park Boulevard, the zoning amendment proposes a new mixed-use zone that will be, excuse me, that will be consistent with the direction of the mixed-use policies in the in-zone update of the zoning bylaw. The mixed-use 2 zone will permit C3 uses, except for auto-related uses, and apartment dwellings that correspond to the Main Street designation and urban design objectives in the Livable Oakville Plan. For blocks 5, 6, 7, and 8, a modified R8 residential zone is proposed to reflect the high-density land use designation and permit the stacked townhouse dwellings, as well as the live-work units along the frontage of Taunton Road between Georgian Drive and Oak Park Boulevard. Regulations were included to reflect the type of built form that is envisioned, the location of commercial and residential uses, and establish setbacks and parking standards that reflect the conceptual design of the development. A copy of the proposed zoning bylaw has been brought forward tonight that was revised recently. The recommendations is that application 1413.27 submitted by Silwell Developments Limited be approved and that bylaw 2012-002 be passed. Thank you.
Thank you for the report and the update. Council, do you have any questions? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the report. I do have a couple of questions. First of all, I just want to be very clear that the issues regarding access are subject to final approval at site plan. So that's the,
yes.
We still have the opportunity to review the access issues at site plan.
Through your worship, yes.
But without dwelling on that issue too long, do you know what the rationale is for not having access off of Taunton Road? It just seems strange that's not part of the project.
I do know that when the applicant heard the concerns about the access points along Georgian, they did go back to look at the possibilities of placing an access point along Taunton Road. Due to the internal circulation of the site and waste management, one of the only locations for it was within pretty close proximity to Oak Park Boulevard. So therefore, it didn't look like it was going to work out as efficiently as the others on Georgian Drive. So we can look at that again through the site plan process.
So we don't know conclusively that that's not possible. We still have a chance to review that.
I do not know that yet.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of the Oak Park Boulevard frontage of the retail units, has there been any consideration given to angle parking to be allowed along that space to hopefully provide the greatest opportunity for success of the retail strip?
That is something we could also look at through the site plan process. We haven't done any review of on-street parking through this.
So that also has not been ruled out at this point?
No.
Excellent. Good answer so far. You talked about the parking, the internal parking, and we had a conversation earlier today, and there's two aspects of the parking, one that complies and one that does not comply. Can you just that does not meet the requirements. Can you just explain what exactly that is all about and the rationale for it?
So I did go back and look, and I was mistaken about the, I was mistaken versus condo versus freehold. So I'm just going to pull this up. For the units, for the mixed-use building along Oak Park Boulevard, we've proposed 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which is consistent with the bylaw. For the stacked townhouse units, which are all going to be freehold, the consolidated bylaw regulates 2 spaces per unit, which we are also doing in the modified R8 zone. So in the R8 zone, we have 1 space dedicated per the unit and 1 space per visitor. So the flexibility in that regulation allows for the location of the visitor space.
And the visitor space is the space outside of the garage, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
Is there any opportunity, I assume all the parking closer to the commercial unit is reserved for the commercial units, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that is where the commercial and or visitor surface parking is. All the tenant spaces are underground for the mixed-use building.
Do those, are those, and maybe this is a site plan issue, but are those visitor spaces available to visitors to the freehold townhouses as well?
That can be better defined through the site plan process. I don't know the exact answer. I believe that there are the spaces for the condo units, again, are applied with the driveway and the garages as well as these spaces here.
Okay. Your Worship, those are all my questions for the moment. I look forward to comments from our constituents.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Are there any members of the public with information for council on this file? We have a delegation registered, Mr. George Brown. Welcome, Mr. Brown. Council looks forward to your information.
Well, thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I do want to commend the applicants for staying very much inside the official plan envelope. And we seem to, I guess, due to the work of you done, we're seeing that more and more, and also the environment, and that's good to see. A couple of things that concern me are, as we look at this whole development, I don't see any place where you can even plant a tree. This looks like an asphalt jungle to me, which is, I think, counter. Now, I could be wrong, and I realize this is site plan, but if you look at coverage and everything, and that's why I really admired what it sounds like Scora was trying to do, which was how do we increase a density in this livable thing, but still have a pleasant environment that gives a little bit of free space to play with the children or whatever it is. I mean, I realize there's a 5% park dedication, but that's not going to be in the neighborhood of these two blocks. So I'm concerned there. The other thing that's a little more specific, at the public meeting before, I asked that, okay, you have a big bylaw change in the back there with a whole bunch of changes, and you have an existing bylaw. And there's nothing that outlines, this is what you have, this is what we're changing, and this is why we're doing it. You get a staff report here that says, this is why we're doing it, and it's all nice and good. Now, the applicant actually, at the request, did put down what he thought was the changes, and that's in Appendix F, page 57 and 58, and that implies that the parking, which is where I was specifically looking at it, is not in conformity with current zoning bylaw, and for both places. And for instance, he says that for your stacked townhouses is 2 spaces per unit plus 25 for visitors. So I think there's a fair bit of confusion of what the existing zoning is and what we want to go to. And this has a tremendous impact, obviously, on the applicant, because if he can get away with less parking spaces and spill them off in the rest of the neighborhood, he can put more things in. And to me, if I were sitting in your shoes, I'd want us to take all these bylaw changes and say what's changed, what's different, what's the impact. With parking, it's very simple. With this application, I don't know how many units is it? We'll say it's 200 units. Well, then if you're off by a half, that's half of one parking would be 400. So we'll say another 50 parking spots, which would probably reduce the number of units you could have by. So I think you haven't been given enough information to make a good, solid decision. I think overall a lot of good things have happened, and I commend everybody for that. Did that make sense?
Well, I have some questions to try to understand what you said. On the drawing that we are looking at, it appears to show approximately 28 trees. I wonder if you had a specific number that you would prefer to see.
Well, as I look around the park down by Georgian Drive and along Taunton, I don't see any room for anything along there. So you've got, now it's harder to show, they aren't highlighted. And so, I mean, you've got some up on that, whatever that internal thing is there and so forth. But there isn't any of that, community space that would be desirable. And there isn't, and the closest thing is Sawgrass Park, which is all the way down. And I'm saying within a community, it's nice to have a neighborhood parkette or anything like that. So I don't think the residents would object to another story. Now, there's whole other complications. I mean, that's why I admired what Scora did for your Canada Lands
Ms. Collingwood, you had a semi-aerial view at one point early in your presentation. It might assist us if you could find that and put, there you go. Does that help talk about it any?
Well, we don't know as to the lease. Those are the town lands that are all supposed to be high-rise apartments.
Yes.
And to the north is already development. So the only thing down there is that Sawgrass Park down by Glen Ashton, which has nothing to do, which is quite a ways from there. And there's the rest of Oak Park all has boulevards. And as far as I can see, there are no boulevards in here that give a nice streetscape.
So I can contribute that across the bottom of the town land, as I recollect, there's a pipeline and
right, which actually goes underneath Sawgrass Park.
Yes, and an implication that the town land will also be park-like there because you can't build on a pipeline. On the pipeline.
Yeah.
All righty, anything else?
And the whole parking issue. I think if I were in your shoes, I would suggest that you find out what the change in parking zoning is and what the implication of that.
The councillor actually quizzed staff about that in his questions. But we could, why don't we revisit that for the benefit of the constituent? Councillor Knoll, would you like to explain what you learned?
Well, instead of doing that, why don't we simply defer this back to Tricia, who can give us the technical response, because she was quite helpful to me earlier today, explaining to me the conditions and the policy implications, because it's not simply just a matter of numbers. There's policy implications around the original concept of the Uptown Core, public transit, et cetera. So I would defer that to our staff member, who's more qualified than I am to explain that. But I would like to comment when Trish is done on the public space issue.
All right, no problem. The reason we have a revised bylaw before us is because there was some changes to there were some corrections to the matter that you might have read. But let's turn to Ms. Collingwood to help us.
Okay, through your worship, thank you. I'm going to go back to, okay. For the mixed-use building along Oak Park Boulevard, there has been a proposal for 1.5 spaces per residential unit. This is consistent with the existing bylaw. There is also the allocation of one space for 32, I believe it's 32.6 square meters of retail, which is also consistent. So we have no deviation there. For the stacked condo units in this section as well as this section, so 131 units here, 81 units here. There, in the revised bylaw, there is a maximum of one space per unit. In addition, another space for visitors per unit. So 2 spaces per unit, which is consistent also with freehold units in Section 30 of our bylaw. So I think we've come to the conclusion. I think we've come to the conclusion that we're consistent. In an effort to keep the parking standards lower, which we're trying to do, but yet still be consistent. It goes along with the policies for Uptown Core being walkable, for the transit terminal, for the extension, as the extension of Taunton comes into place, we will have bus service and bus stops located along Taunton. We would like to encourage these people right off the bat to be using that service. And in hopefully the near future, we'll also have dedicated bus lanes on Trafalgar. So keeping the standards low, but yet consistent, we are striving to start changing those behaviors.
Thank you, Ms. Collingwood. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you for that. Do you want me to comment on or provide comment on the public space issue?
Yes, that's what you asked.
Thank you. Can I have the slide back up, Tricia, of the overview of the? Yeah, thank you. That one. I just wanted to. Just to me, Mr. Brown is very aware of the Uptown Core. He was a big participant in the visioning sessions when we revisited the Uptown Core, so I'm not telling him anything he's not already intimately familiar with. He's probably one of the more up-to-date residents in Oak Park in terms of the past, present, and future of the community. But I just wanted to draw to both his attention as well as the members of council that part of the concept behind the core itself was the sacrifice between green space in individual lots versus the public spaces, the additional public spaces that have been created. Mr. Brown referred to the Sawgrass Parkette, which you'll see is that round space underneath the yellow block with the circular sidewalks, like a bit of a racetrack. Beside that, where the Tribute Sales Center is, you'll see the green space. That's already dedicated parkland. And the pipeline that exists under the property that we own pretty much renders that unusable for anything other than green space. So that will likely become green space as well. Oak Park's also blessed in that it has Memorial Park, which is to the I guess that's the north of the development, where the memorial is, and with additional funds, parks and lieu funds and development charges, we'll be able to finish out that very large park facility, which to a large extent is a nice facility, but also certain parts of it are dog's breakfast because there's still large dumpings of construction fill and such on that site. So hopefully that will come. I know the developer's quite anxious for that to happen as well. So those are just the comments I wanted to make, just to draw to council's attention that issue in terms of the public space that. And the last thing I wanted to mention that we have Millbank Park across the street as well, but also I wanted to mention that some residents had expressed an interest in attempting to secure additional play structure space in the community to accommodate the epidemic of children. I say that because nobody planned for as many kids as we have, and we have a lot of kids in Oak Park. And I've already been in conversations, Councillor Grant and I have discussed this with Parks, about potentially locating at some point an additional play structure, potentially in that Sawgrass Parkette or somewhere in that area, to provide additional recreation space for children.
Thank you very much, Councillor Knoll. Mr. Brown, thank you very much for bringing your information.
Okay, the one question we haven't, because in a report, Trish said that the parking, where was the very beginning, and then when I talked to her on the phone, she realized and the report is not consistent with what the developer had put in and is making his comparison. And what I'm saying is we're going to a much more, we're reducing parking significantly what current standards are. Now, there is not excess parking in the whole area. And so what we're doing is you're going to go into an area which even has lower standards of parking, and it'll spill over into the other area. And you can argue, yes, it's livable work Oakville, and you're going to have transit, but you're not going to have the work part up to the density that you eventually have it for quite a while, unless you know something I don't, because that's the last part that goes into any development. And so I really urge you to find out what the impact is of what you're doing by saying reducing the parking spaces, which it looks to me like it's somewhere around 50 spaces, which is significant. But, I'm just doing it because I can't make the comparison based on the information here, and I don't see how you people can. So I would, if I were in your shoes, I'd ask staff, say, what's the existing bylaw? What would be the total number of places required for this many units? And this is what we're proposing. Okay, we're doing, I'll say it's 50 less. And, we think 20 can be taken by transit, but I think that's wishful thinking because it's our transit isn't full. I know we want to get it. I know that's one of the things we want to do. But let's not make the situation worse. And I've always said it's easier to convert a parking area into a structure than a structure into a parking area. So I'd certainly say as you go through this change. So I would personally ask that you would ask, what is the impact of these changes? And I personally would say you should do that for all these bylaw changes. What's the current situation? What's the change? And you might be surprised.
Thank you. Actually, I thought that's what we just did. And I heard Ms. Collingwood say that this is consistent with our standards.
Yeah, but I challenge that because the developer went through and laid out what is. She hasn't compared it to the current zoning. She's compared it to her new zoning. And she said, of course, it's consistent with the new zoning. And she's compared it to the livable Oakville standards, which are a broader plan standards. So I don't see that.
I'll tell you what, let's ask her a third time.
Okay.
And we'll both listen really carefully.
Okay.
Because one of us heard different, we heard two different things.
Right.
Ms. Collingwood.
Through your worship, I think there's two things going on here which are confusing as well. In Appendix F, G, where the comparison is that the developer provided for us, that comparison was provided based on the public information requests that we received and is based on the proposed bylaws that they submitted in comparison with the existing bylaw. We have crafted our own bylaw and brought it forward. So I kind of urge you to just, I mean, what is in Appendix F as the comparison isn't a reflection of the bylaw that we did bring forward tonight. So it is confusing in that way, and I understand how it's causing a little bit of trouble. But again, with the bylaw that we've brought forward tonight, in comparing it to existing uptown policies as well as Section 30 of the existing bylaw, we are consistent for both the mixed-use development as well as the freehold townhouses.
Okay, my point is, she's ignoring the current zoning. Yes, the current zoning. The current zoning, and unless the developer's wrong, he says it's 2 spaces per unit and a quarter for visitors.
Excuse me. The developer's wrong, is what she just said.
Okay, but she hasn't laid it out. So we have to act on faith, isn't that's what you're saying?
No, she's given us a, thank you. We don't want to get into
Okay,
arguing.
that's fine.
That's
fine.
We've heard the question.
I hope I've
We've
made
answered
my
it.
point. I don't think I have, but that's all
We've
right.
answered, staff have answered it 3 times. Council has heard that the existing bylaw and the proposed bylaw are consistent. The item that you read where the discrepancy arises was comparing something else, a proposed developer bylaw.
Okay, then I would ask you to ask the staff, what does the existing bylaw say? She
just
hasn't
said-
answered that question. She said what the proposed bylaw said and how it compares to livable Oakville.
Actually, she said it's consistent, the exact words were, it's consistent with the existing bylaw. And that's 3 times, so really, I think we're there.
Okay, can somebody give me the bylaw?
Pardon? Pardon?
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, it's also an issue that, again, we can flesh out through the site plan process.
Okay. So there's another round yet to come, Mr. Brown, at site plan. So you get another chance at it. Councillor Knoll, do you have a motion, or Councillor Grant?
I'll give you a motion, Your Worship, and I'd just like to just briefly speak to it, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Brown for coming out. He's been consistently interested in everything Uptown Core, and we do appreciate that very much. What I've heard, where I still have concerns, what I've heard from the constituents and where I still have concerns relate to predominantly site access along Georgian. We've heard that can be addressed to the site plan committee. We can continue to explore this issue with respect to parking at site plan. So the final chapter is not written on this proposal. What we do have before us, in my opinion and staff's opinion, is a proposal which is consistent with the objectives of the Uptown Core. It is something that is a long time in coming. It's the residents, the majority of the residents that I've heard from are anxious to have this final chapter on this part of the community written. They've lived for a long time with an open field beside their homes, and they're anxious to have to bring some closure to that. In addition, in order to make the Uptown Core work and to eventually see our vision for that community, we need the density. We need the residential population in there. We need the employment in there, because until we have that, Oak Park Boulevard, which is our Uptown Core Main Street, will never, ever reach critical mass. And this proposal takes us one step closer to achieving that. And the last comment I want to make is that it's wonderful and exciting to see that Taunton Road will finally get built out. We desperately need that road. There's so much traffic incursion through the residential streets that Taunton Road will be a wonderful opportunity to remove some of that. And I said that was my last, but this is my true last. Oak Park and the Uptown Core is blessed with some of the best access to public transit in Oakville. With the transit terminal and the routes that go through that community, I think that We have built it, and they will come in time. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I think, again, the majority of Oak Park residents, I think, continue to support the original vision of livable, walkable community that's supported by public transit. So with that, I look forward to council's support.
Thank you. And just for clarity, Councillor Knoll's motion, if I may, is that application Z141327 submitted by Silwell Developments Limited be approved and bylaw 2012-002 be passed as revised in accordance with the memorandum from Planning Services dated January 16th and distributed at the meeting.
I said that telepathically.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Did. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried and adopted. And that will bring us to the advisory committee minutes from Heritage Oakville. Council, how do you wish to proceed with your minutes of Heritage Oakville? 4-6-D. Right. All right. So there's the minutes and there's the approvals, and I was seeking to separate those into two sort of packages. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt the minutes, but not to deal with the recommendations. And I'll take that from Councillor Giddings. Thank you, Councillor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That deals with the minutes. Now that brings us to the heritage permit applications, and that would be item, I guess we're going to call it 6A, is that right? And, pardon?
B is when we have delegates.
All right. So we have 6A, 6B, and 6C, and we have a registered delegation for 6B, and we'll jump to that, and we're looking for Boyd Waite. Mr. Waite, welcome to the meeting. Thank you for your patience, and Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. So, good evening, Council members, Mayor Burton. I'm President of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, and I'm speaking tonight to the proposal for 52nd Street on behalf of the OLRA. I also live within the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District at 87 Allen Street. Let me first say that OLRA is not opposed to development at 52nd Street, or for that matter, where appropriate within the heritage districts. We do believe, however, that new development should be appropriate to the heritage nature of the area and must conform to the specific district plan for the area. In this case, the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District Plan, which was finalized in 1991. We believe this plan document is the foundation of the Heritage District, and it is these guidelines that have been used over the years to control development in this Heritage District. OLRA and the neighbours within the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage District have been happy with the results over the time of the plan. Our area has become a destination for those enjoying the heritage aspects, and there are many examples of owners who have gone to great lengths and expense in order to make sure that their new developments or additions and renovations both fit within the area and conform to the plan. Our objections to the proposal for 52nd Street are several. It seems that town staff are encouraging a contemporary look to the addition and the use of contemporary materials such as zinc and large areas of glass, and this to us is in direct contradiction of the plan. The plan itself seeks to provide guidelines to preserve and conserve the historic and architectural fabric of the area and to ensure continuing maintenance of the historical and architectural character unique to the town of Oakville. The existing building at 52nd Street is noted as a Category 2 building, and as such its development is governed by the specific recommendations made within the plan. As follows. Maintaining compatible scale and mass is encouraged. Alterations or additions may be built to complement the proportions of the structure. Retention of existing roof lines along the streetscape is encouraged. New roof lines should complement the area's existing roof pattern. Materials used on new roofs should be consistent with other buildings in the area. And historically, many buildings in Oakville contained wood shingle roofs. It is encouraged that wood shingles be considered for new roofs or for reshingling. When new materials are required, it is recommended that they match or complement the original. Metals and plastics are discouraged. So in terms of scale and mass, the proposed addition appears to be much larger than the existing house, and in our view is not compatible in scale and mass with that existing house, or the neighbour's properties on 2nd Street. The addition simply appears to dwarf the existing house, particularly from the north, south, and the west elevations. In fact, from the south and west elevations, almost none of the original house is visible, and is totally overwhelmed by the new addition using large glass windows and the zinc roof. These elevations are clearly visible from the streetscape on 2nd Street and also from Union Street, especially during winter months. So the roof lines proposed do not appear to complement the existing roof lines or the roof lines along the streetscape. The roof is out of scale with the existing house, and the flat roof line seems to detract from the original house. The flat roof line and the zinc materials to be used do not complement the original, and they are specifically discouraged in the plan. So the materials are not consistent with other buildings in the area. The windows to be added on the proposed addition do not appear to be consistent with the windows found on the original house, and are of a different scale that we believe detracts from the heritage aspects of the house and streetscape. The windows to the rear and south on the addition are far larger and out of scale with the existing windows, and the windows to the front are similarly out of scale, specifically 2 windows which seem to be 3/4 of the height of the walls of the building, and are not in keeping with the heritage aspects of the area. So in regards to the points I've made for the proposal at 52nd Street, OLRA strongly recommends to Council that it accept the recommendations given by Heritage Oakville Committee and deny this application.
Thank you very much for the information.
Actually, I have a little bit more, which is in regards to the heritage process itself.
Well then, please continue.
Okay. So as a result of the proposal, some shortcomings of the current heritage process have been highlighted to us. So we understand that a few years ago, the requirement to have at least one resident from each heritage area sit on the Heritage Committee was withdrawn, and we're not sure exactly why that happened. And we believe it limits input on the heritage area matters from the residents within the areas themselves. There's also no requirement of the Heritage Committee to notify neighbours of heritage proposals, and again, we believe this limits input from residents of the heritage areas, and we believe there should be a requirement to notify residents, in much the same way as the Committee of Adjustment is required to do. The Heritage Committee also does not post documents such as architectural drawings to the town website until the Friday before the Heritage Committee meets, which is on the Tuesday following. This allows insufficient time for the neighbours to react and provide input to the committee if that's necessary. And most of the time it's not necessary. Also, town staff have published and recently updated a heritage planning kit. The kit contains various guides for architects and owners and for heritage proposals. And we believe some of the guidelines within the kit are actually in conflict to the official plan for the area. For example, in the kit it states, new work should be distinguishable from the old structure. Building additions and new construction should be recognized as products of their own time. Whereas in the heritage plan it states, buildings of 1 and 2 category are important because they define the heritage character of the district area. Conserving these buildings with minimal changes is encouraged. However, if alterations or additions are being considered, they should be sympathetic to the original structure. Compatible or sympathetic alterations should exhibit the following details: proportional scale and mass, consistent roof design, similar window details, complementary colors, and compatible materials. From our experience at the OMB in previous times, the foundational document that is used there is the specific district plan. Architects now appear to be interpreting the Heritage Kit, which is partly derived from the provincial guidelines, to say that new additions should be of contemporary design and not necessarily complementary in style to the existing streetscape. So, to come to an end, we ask that Council consider a review of the heritage approval process to include, but maybe not limited to, the following: the Heritage Committee notifications to residents, timeline of documents posted to the town's website, the appointment of the members of the Heritage Committee and how residents could be included, and a review of the town documentation and its consistency with the approved heritage plans. Also, if there is to be any modification of the heritage plans themselves, then this must be with full public input, and more specifically input from the residents' associations and those residing within the heritage districts. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you be able to provide us a copy of your remarks?
Yes, I have 20 copies with me. So.
I only need one. I'm going to refer it to planning to assist them in working on your requests.
Okay.
I wonder if there are any members of staff, Commissioner, who might like to provide any insight into the points that Mr. Waits raised, or if you'd rather just wait for a report, to prepare a report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to Council. One item I'd like to talk about is, again, having to do with the notice provisions. Of course, the town follows the notification requirements under the Ontario Heritage Act, and as the gentleman indicated, there is no formal notice requirement. I think that has everything to do with the right of appeal on a heritage permit application. Unlike a planning application for, say, a zoning bylaw amendment or a variance, where there is a public notice required, and there is, of course, then a right of appeal of the adjacent resident to that decision. The heritage permit application, the only right of appeal is on a recommendation against or a refusal by council, and that is the applicant. Having said that, as pointed out, we do post the Heritage Oakville agendas on the website. This is the first I've heard that there's an issue with that, because we've had success with other organizations following those agendas. For example, the Bronte Historical Society oftentimes will check to see if there's something that affects them, and then they show up to make their points known at Heritage Oakville. So again, that would be my comment on the notification piece.
So we'll circulate the remarks from the association given by Mr. Waits, and staff could review it, I believe, to try to make it as consistent as possible with council's value of facilitating public understanding and participation. So it probably assists people to participate in Heritage Oakville if they have as much understanding as possible of what's coming. And I know staff understand that, so I won't belabor the point. And thank you for the rest of the remarks, and we will endeavor to pursue them all.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Waits? Thank you very much. Are there other? We also have a delegation scheduled from, I'm going to take a shot here. It's either Denny or Dennis Bastien.
Denis is good.
Denis. Third time lucky. Mr. Bastien, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Members of council, I live on 41 2nd Street across from the proposals of 52nd Street. I'm a professional appraiser, and I've been appraising in Oakville for 24 years, and was also a member of the Heritage Committee back in 2000 to 2002. I would like to commence by stating unequivocally that my remarks here tonight are directed strictly at the heritage and planning process and not towards any individuals involved. We would like to also say that we recognize that change is required as heritage properties need updating and that we object to and welcome appropriate change. On the evening of December 12, 2011, prior to a Heritage Committee meeting the next morning, our neighborhood was alerted last minute by the OLRA that the approval had been given by the Town Planning Department for a very inappropriate contemporary addition at 52nd Street, which did not follow our heritage guidelines. Suffice to say, our first reaction was shock as to how this would possibly be happening in our neighborhood. After a lengthy investigation, our conclusion is that there's been a system failure and that the checks and balances which have served us for so many years are no longer in place. We are usually a quiet neighborhood, but I venture to say that this issue has awakened a sleeping giant. At last count, over 11 letters have been submitted to our ward councillor, and over 5 phone calls have been made. In addition, we have a number of concerned neighbors at this meeting here tonight. After investigation as to what went wrong, it appears that the best of intentions, the town planning staff updated the heritage permit kit on the town website to reflect provincial heritage conservation guidelines, stating that while striving, and I quote, while striving for complementary additions, these additions should not attempt to replicate original structures, unquote. The provincial guidelines do have merit and should certainly be considered in an application. However, the streetscape and district context is equally important in any interpretation of applications for change, for change within a heritage district. Equally important, the foundational document for 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Conservation District Plan and this bylaw dated February 18, 1988 cannot be altered in isolation and requires extensive public consultation and input. As well, the one specific provincial guideline that states, and I quote again, conserve the heritage value and character defining elements when creating any new additions to an historic place or any related new construction, make the new work physically and visually compatible with and subordinate to and distinguishable from the historic place, unquote, is subject to a lot of interpretation and philosophical debate. The important part of this statement, which is often not recognized, is the first part, visually compatible and subordinate to, and this is one of our primary objections to the 52nd Street proposal. It is our understanding that there's been a lack of continuity in the town planning staff, and that as a result, it's been difficult to maintain an understanding history and context. In addition, there is no formal mechanism in place for the Heritage Committee to seek input from the OLRA and/or affected neighbors. This brings me to my final point under the heading of what went wrong, which is that there's apparently no requirement for notification of neighbors unless there's a variance on the application form itself. On top of this, plans are only required to be posted on the town's website on a Friday before Tuesday Heritage meeting. How does the proposal contravene the 1st and 2nd Street District Plan? Well, on page 19, subsection C, section C, subsection 1 of the Act, entitled Specific Recommendations for Category 1 and 2 Building Stocks, in which 52nd Street is a Category 2, by the way, the Act clearly states if alterations or additions are being considered, they should be sympathetic to the original structure. Compatible or sympathetic alterations should exhibit the following details: proportional scale and mass, consistent roof design, similar window details, complementary colors, and compatible materials. Unfortunately, time does not permit me to cover all our objections in detail, but these are available upon request. They include objections to scale and mass, roof line, details, windows, and choice of materials. While working through this process, I have heard the word, we don't want to create a Disneyland in the Heritage District. This thinking appears to be based on some concept that additions should not try to duplicate historic buildings, and that we don't want reproductions. I'm not a heritage expert, however, I know that I have many comments regarding our house at 41 2nd Street that goes something like this. Your home is so beautiful, how old is it? Meaning that they think it is a genuine heritage home. It was actually a new design built by Grenweiss, who's also doing the addition at 52nd Street, back in 1997, and keeping with the Heritage Guideline, and won Urban Design Awards. I believe that the heritage area has become a destination for many people, and that they come to Oakville to see what historic homes look like in this era. We see them drive up and down the street on weekends and can categorically tell you that they are not looking to see contemporary additions to heritage homes such as the one proposed on 52nd Street. With regards to whether Disneyland replicas are appropriate, may I respectfully suggest that, fortunate as we are to live close to the lake and downtown Oakville, we pay a disproportionate share of our property taxes, and should we not have some say about how our neighborhood looks? Since this proposal has come to light, I've had many neighbors talk to me about the disconnect between what the town is trying to achieve by designating the downtown core a heritage area, while at the same time appearing to relax standards in other heritage districts. Oakville was awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Award for community leadership in recognition of our leadership in heritage conservation and promotion in 2009. The visionary process conducted by urban planner Andre Douane stated that Oakville is as good as it gets. I know everybody's heard that one over and over. And our heritage district is a big part of this success. Why are we not upholding these values? And lastly, I would encourage council to adopt the following recommendations for future checks and balances. 1, any change to the heritage district plan and bylaws must have public input and consultation. 2, neighbors in the heritage district should be notified by letter of any proposals for additions, renovation, demolitions at least 2 weeks prior to heritage approval, regardless of whether a minor variance is required. 3, architectural drawings for these proposals should be posted on the town website 2 weeks prior to the heritage meeting in order to give time for review and public input. 4, heritage committees should be required to include a resident from each heritage district. And lastly, 5, the heritage committee should seek the input from the affected neighbors and work closely with the Residents Association. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your information. Could you also provide us, or have you just provided us?
I have given it to Jill already.
We'll send it to the same place for the same purpose.
Thank you very much.
You understand under our procedure, we won't be adopting any of these things tonight, but
No,
they will be
fair
given
enough.
due consideration.
For review is perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
So there's only one question remains.
Sure.
Boyd worked into his remarks that he supports the Heritage Oakville Committee recommendation to council to deny the permit. I thought I'd ask you if you'd like to say how you feel about the Heritage Oakville Committee recommendation.
I support that, Boyd as well. We have a lot of similar thoughts, and although we work collectively, I'm just representing the residents in this case.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your information and your
You're welcome.
answers. Are there other members of the public with information for council on the matter? Don't be shy. We have time. All right. I'll confine it to table. I'll look for a motion. It's your ward, Councillor Giddings. Your motion.
Be happy to move approval of items 6A, 6B, and 6C.
So to be clear, 6A is a permit application for 376 Douglas Avenue, and it's an approval. 6B is the heritage permit application for 52nd Street, and the recommendation is denial. So voting for the motion will deny the application. And item C is an approval, just like item A. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed if any? And that carries. So thank you. Now, council only has one matter left on its agenda, and that's a confidential matter. It deals with litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the community. And that is a permitted use of a meeting closed to the public. And at this time, I would ask a councillor to give us a motion that we proceed into a meeting closed to the public for that purpose. Councillor Dudek, thank you so much. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Madam Clerk, would you arrange the chamber for a meeting closed to the public? Thank you very much. All right, we now resume our public meeting. Council has met in a meeting closed to the public to consider a matter concerning litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the community. And in that meeting, Council has given direction to staff. It now would be appropriate to have a motion to rise and report, and I'll take that from Councillor Johnston. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. I rise and report that Council has met in Committee of the Whole and has made recommendations on public hearing items 1 and 2, discussion item 3, confidential discussion item C1, and advisory committee minutes item 4, as noted by the clerk. And a mover and seconder for this report would be welcome. Councillor Lapworth and Councillor Elgar. All in favor? Opposed? The report is adopted. Council, do you have any new business to bring forward at this time? Thank you. Mover and seconder for consideration on reading of the bylaws would be in order. Councillor Dudek, Councillor Demoff. This is for bylaws 2012-002 as revised, and 2012-003 and 2012-004. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And the bylaws are adopted. That completes our agenda. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we are adjourned.